All right. So this is just a quick, we're just going to quickly go over some like brain science things before we jump into retrieval practices explicitly. So this is Daniel Willingham's model of remembering. And it's a really good reminder for teachers that whatever students are thinking about is what they will remember. So it just helps us remember that the information that sticks in our memory is the information that we are asking our students to think about, talk about, write about. Um, it's just a good way to remember that, like, we only move information into our long-term memory after we've exposed students to it over multiple instances. So we can't just say something once or twice and expect them to remember it. We need to continually go back to that, which is retrieval practice in essence. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So before we start, just take 30 seconds to identify possible times in a student's day when they might be experiencing cognitive overload, and what can you as their teacher do about it? And also, what is something that you taught in September that's important for students to keep in their long-term memory? And have you purposefully built in time for students to retrieve this information? So just take a few seconds to think about that, and then we'll jump into all things retrieval on the next slide. All right, All right, so what is retrieval practice? It is a powerful research-based strategy that boosts student learning by recalling information from their long-term memory. And it's about getting information out of students' head, and it strengthens learning more than rereading or simply reviewing.
So, why does retrieval practice work? Our human brains are wired to forget up to 90% of new information within 1 week. And this is actually beneficial to us because we can't retain all the information that comes into our working memory. So, retrieval practice actually strengthens our memory pathways. It fights this forgetting curve. So, it improves our long term retention, and it actually improves it the most if we can recall it almost right before it goes into like no man's land, right before it's forgotten. If we can pull it back then, it makes it even stronger. As a teacher, retrieval practice also helps you identify where there are gaps in your students' understanding so that you can go back and fill those gaps. It really builds students' confidence. They actually love it. And we know that confidence also builds motivation. Like it's the best builder of motivation, really. So it helps them also be aware of what they know and what they don't know. So it builds in that metacognition as well. It also promotes transfer to learning in new context. So when that memory is more front of mind, then it's more accessible to them when they have other opportunities where it could come into play.
All right, and then just two notes before we jump into examples. Retrieval practice should be low stakes, low to no stakes, and timing is key. So it should be quick and ungraded. Mistakes are a part of learning, so students need to, learn to accept that like they're going to make mistakes and that's okay. And like the low stakes part of this is really important. We need to focus on their effort and not always the accuracy. We need to be doing this daily in short bursts. So I would say like you probably shouldn't be spending longer than like 15 minutes a day total asking students to retrieve. We need to space retrieval practice for memory retention. And then we need to interleave it when possible to mix up the content and topics so that you know, students aren't like learning to predict what's being asked to be retrieved.
We're going to go over 3 examples of retrieval practice tonight. And these are the common names you might have heard them referred to as in the past. We're going to talk about a brain dump, which we will term a brain boost. We're going to talk about different variations of mini quizzes and then just different rapid retrieval routines that you can implement just in the snap of your fingers on the fly, even. And we're going to give some examples from the upper grades, and then I'll give examples from the lower grades.
So basically, a brain boost or a brain dump is when students write down everything they can remember about a topic, and then there are different variations of this. We can use a more structured brain boost, where like we can almost turn it into like a mind map or a concept map. But if you go to the next slide, these are some different examples from a poetry module that we did. I simply started by asking students to write down everything they could remember about our poetry module. And then after a couple of minutes, we paused. This is a more example of a structured brain boost because you can see that they tried to organize it. The one on the right, you can see that he organized it by color and then like circled in the colors. And it's a good way for them to like sort of categorize or organize this information in their like to show how they're categorizing that information like on their paper. And you can stop every like 30 seconds and you can like if you can tell that students are struggling, you can give them like a word or a phrase that might spark some other topics so that they're not just sitting there. But I would say like if once you get started with this routine and you've done it a few times, like they will write the entire time that the timer's going. And so I usually set the timer for like 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. I see where we're at. If I need to give them, like some hints or, some reminders, I can do that. And it doesn't always have to turn into like this big ordeal, right? Like sometimes it's just write down everything you can remember, and then we're going to come back to this tomorrow and add to it tomorrow. So yeah, those are my examples of what a brain boost looks like in fourth grade.
Use the brain boost in a couple of different ways in first grade. We started off the year with more of a team boost. So they would work in groups of 2 or 3 and they would write or draw whatever they could remember about a topic on a larger piece of chart paper. And we also will do that. So usually I'll take a topic and divide it into subtopics. So if we're talking about space, we might have one area where we're remembering everything we can about the moon and then the sun and then Earth. And so they can just be specialists in one of those, or after they've done one round of remembering what they can about the moon, we've done it where they could rotate and then they visit all 3 areas. That adds another layer of learning because they first look and see what the previous group wrote down and discuss whether they agree or disagree with that. And then they think of other things they could add on to that. And with both of those formats, we always come back together as a whole group and we share out what's on each poster. And I let the students provide some feedback, and I would provide feedback as well if needed. But most of the time, the students catch anything because we want to identify if there are misconceptions. We don't want those to get embedded into their long-term memory. So it's been fun to watch the kids develop that skill and kind of question each other to get more clarity on why they put something on their poster. And then I've also started now doing a mix and mingle where they can recall individually at first on a piece of paper, and then they move around the room to music. And when the music stops, they pair up with someone and they compare their notes. And I've done it where they have a clipboard and pencil and they can add stuff right then. And I've also done that where they mix and mingle and they talk, they share their notes, and then we do 2 or 3 rounds with their goal in mind that they will add at least one thing to their paper when they go back to their desk. So they've been really enjoying that new take on the brain boost lately. This is just a quick example of the directions I use. This actually is something we did today as we were learning about habitats. So they had 4 or 5 minutes to write down things they could remember about each habitat. And I tell them they can draw, they can write words, they can write phrases, or they can write sentences. It's really about pulling the information from their mind that they can remember about each of those habitats. And then we did the mix and mingle, and then they added one more fact. And I think I have a few pictures of that on the next slide. These are just a few examples. The one on the left is a complete work sample from one student who remembered that the Arctic is super cold. It has a few plants. The desert has lots of cactuses and super dry and hot. And you'll notice the spelling is not perfect, but the goal of this activity is retrieval, to pull the content back, to make sure that they understand the content correctly. And there's a time and place for the corrections on spelling and that type of thing. You'll notice on the right, these are from 3 different students, but I just wanted to show the difference in someone who chose to depict their knowledge with a picture, and then someone who used just words and phrases, and then someone who was writing more complete sentences. So those are actually examples from 4 different students from our Brain Boost today. And I have a video coming up next. The video, those are just pictures from today of their mix and mingle. They really enjoy that. And it is such a quick process, too. I mean, a few minutes, but powerful minutes. And now I have a video. This video, just to set it up a little bit, we had been learning about the layers of Earth. And so this group was tasked with writing down what they could remember about the different layers of Earth. And then at the end, you'll see a little bit of our whole group share from one of the groups. So we'll play. I don't hear any sound. Does anybody hear sound?
Virginia, I think the sound's not working.
Yeah, because that's the whole first part who I haven't showed us. You know what I mean? So I would say and then okay, now you said you wanted to write mantle. Do you know how to spell mantle? No, this can say the sounds. Well, I know how to. Do you want me to tell you how to spell it? Yeah, T.
Hey, let's have an audience of future geologists listening up to the dinosaur group.
So that's that long dinosaur with the strong tail, and Mario helped me remember what it was called. And it had the strong tail, so I had the spikes. And Mario, do you want to say what it's called? This is called the Stegosaurus, and that's supposed to be a picture of a pterodactyl. And I don't think you should have dropped this because that's kind of like a fossil, and you're supposed to be drawing dinosaurs.
That's an example of them giving feedback, which gives us a great opportunity to discuss the overlap of those concepts and to make connections between the concepts. So it leads to some great conversations. What we didn't hear at the very beginning was the first little girl said, "I'm going to write the most important layer of Earth, the crust." And then the little boy said, "Well, I don't think that's the most important layer." And then the third little girl said, "Do you think it's the inner core?" I just thought that was such a funny conversation for first graders to be having.
I'm gonna just pause right now because we have a couple of questions in the chat that I think are probably worth surfacing. So first for Stephanie, did they all have different topics? That's a question from Jessica.
Sure. It really depends. I've done it both ways. In that particular instance, I divided our unit up into 5 topics. So they did each have one topic they specialized in. When we studied the human body, we divided it into the different systems of the body. But after they had a few minutes at the respiratory system, then they rotated and went to the skeletal system. So they actually went to all the different posters. So I do it in different ways depending on the time I have and the purpose and different things like that. You can do it either way though.
Well, this next question I feel like is really up. It's actually up both of your alleys, but I'll hand it over to Lauren. Lauren, do you see benefit in allowing students to mix and mingle before they start to write?
Yes, and actually I was going to jump in before we get to the scaffolded setup on the next slide. to just like talk about some of the times that I do this, I use brain dumps a lot before students start writing. So as like a pre-writing strategy so that they can get their thoughts down. And so I'll often have them do the brain dump independently, and then we'll mix and mingle, and they can add to their brain dump so that like they're getting feedback and then adding to it. That's one of the times I do it. I also I do it we are like an oracy focused school, so we do a lot of discussion. So I'll do like a brain boost before we have like a small group or a whole group discussion so that students are accountable for, they have their ideas on paper and they can refer back to that when needed. I will also use it before they take like a math test. I'll give them a blank sheet of paper, and I'll have them, write down everything they can remember from the module, like examples. I'll give them, about 5 minutes to do that. And then I even like will let them use that on the test if they find it helpful. But I've noticed that the act of simply participating in the brain boost beforehand is really all that's needed. Very few students end up having to go back and like look at it. So I think that's a great way to like prepare them for an assessment. And then the last thing I've been doing recently is that I've noticed like some students get really overwhelmed when given a new task. And so just giving them a sticky note and having them like brain dump on a sticky note can be really helpful. It sort of helps like calm their nerves. It shows them that they do in fact have the information that they need. They just need to, take a few minutes to like pull that knowledge out of their brain before we get started. So it's like kind of become this like, I don't know, like it really like helps like calm them down and prepare them to get started. I did want to address one of the questions in the chat was about having students correct any errors. And just because I say something's ungraded doesn't mean that like you shouldn't be giving them feedback and having them make corrections. So I totally think like that, you don't want them to think that they have something correct if it's not. So I would totally like have them make those corrections. I just mean I don't put it in the grade book. And then were there any other questions, Kata, that we need to address before we move on?
I think there are a couple more, which is great. I think I'll hand this one over to Stephanie because the video is of your students. Stephanie, do you give your students feedback on their conversation skills? Do you teach critical feedback? I can actually answer this question for you, but I will let you answer it. And constructive feedback to them. They're very adorable and they talk like middle schoolers.
Yes, they are very adorable. I agree. We work on our conversation skills throughout the year. We work on giving feedback glows and grows, and work on accepting that feedback and understanding the purpose of it. At the beginning of the year, sometimes we have some perfectionists. And so it's really a classroom culture thing where, I tell them mistakes are not accepted, they're expected. That means we're learning. And so after a few weeks of them hearing that and them seeing that it's not just me saying it, but that is truly how we feel, they just open up to that.
That's awesome. And then just one more question. Keep dropping them in the chat, but I think we should move on after this for now. Question about mini whiteboards. Do you ever use mini whiteboards for brain boosts, or do you prefer paper so you can kind of hold on and capture the experience more permanently? Like either or both of you.
Yeah, I think you can do either. If I'm using a brain boost as a pre-writing like activity, then I think I'd prefer to have it on paper so that students can go back and refer to that as they are, planning their writing. But if it's, like just a quick rapid retrieval situation, I think a mini whiteboard is great.
Another thing I'll just add on to that is we do a lot on whiteboards, and our desktops are actually whiteboards, but we will grab our iPad and add it to Seesaw. So we also have it, on record as well, even though we wrote it on a whiteboard.
Excellent. All right. Ding, 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 Virginia.
Ding. Ding.
Okay. And so just to note that retrieval is not like an all or nothing. It's flexible and you should be able to like adjust it in the moment based on what students need. If you are hesitant to start using like a brain boost, I would start by giving them like a concept map, either like partially filled in or blank, and fill it in together, kind of like Stephanie was talking earlier about starting as like a whole class and then building out to like maybe small groups, partners, and then, individually, because I think students are going to take something away from it regardless of, what format you use.
We also modeled the brain boost as a class a lot before they even went and did it with the group. Like we would just all, be sharing things we remember as I charted it on the poster to demonstrate how I could put that as a word, or maybe I'm going to draw a sketch of that one just to model the process.
All right, and we're going to jump into mini quizzes. These are low stakes or no stakes quizzes that have just a few questions that are designed to pull specific information from students' long-term memory. And again, like there are definitely optimal times to do this, within like a week or two of introducing a topic. So you're not waiting too long to ask students to retrieve it. And then like the time between asking them to retrieve it again, like gets a little wider each time. So that's just a note. Ding.
So what's the purpose of a mini kit quiz, a traditional one? Well, it checks to see if the information is still there. And if it is there, if it's reachable, can they still access that information? It interrupts that forgetting curve because the forgetting curve is natural. All of our brains do that. So it interrupts that and brings it back to the front of mind. I use activities like this a lot at the beginning of a lesson to kind of prime the pump. I look at the prerequisite skills that might be needed, and we might do a short mini quiz on those. And it also gives me some great feedback on how much scaffolding might be needed during the upcoming lesson. It also builds metacognition. So sometimes students feel like they know something until they see a question, and then they realize, oh, I don't know that as well as I thought I did. So it helps in all those ways. Not a test, though.
Hey, so these are adaptable. I'm going to talk about retrieval grids and mini quizzes kind of as one entity because they sort of meet the same goal. So retrieval grids, they're adaptable to all grade levels and content areas. They promote spaced retrieval and can be used for interleaving. I'm going to have an example on the next slide that shows you I make one each week and I mix the ELA, science, and social studies all in one, and then I have a separate retrieval grid for math. So I make one of these like basically every Sunday. And I, think about like what are students going to be learning this week? What did they learn last week? What did they learn last month? And then like last year, like, in like September, October. And so these are just some examples. You can assign points to these or not. Like my students are really like point motivated, even though this isn't going into the grade book or something. They like to like challenge themselves. So sometimes I'll say like, you have 4 minutes, try to earn 6 points. And so however they go about getting those 6 points, they do that. And I used to like print a sheet that was basically a blank version of this and had them fill in the answers on that sheet. But now I just have them do it in their notebook. Because that way they can store it. They have access to it and can go back to it. So yeah, like I said, these questions are a mix. They're interleaved between ELA, science, and social studies. And then, like I said, I make one for math. The next slide has an example of math. This was one from the beginning of the year. The ones that I make now are 4x4. But it's just a really good way to like keep things fresh in students' minds without, drilling them, I guess is the best way to put that. And, you have a mix of like the rigor is, different. So it's accessible to all students. Obviously you want to push all students to answer all questions, but there's an entry point for everyone. And if you go to the next one.
Let's do that. Well, actually, Lauren, I'll let you finish talking about it, and then we have a few questions.
Okay. And then, sorry, the last, back to the mini quizzes. So like the retrieval grids, I'll like 2 times a day, usually I'll have them pull their notebook out and I'll say like, we're going to spend 4 minutes on retrieval. So that's just sort of like if we have a few minutes here and there when it's like a good time to have them do that, like either like right before lunch or right before specials. It's just a good way to use that time without like having to like move on to a new activity that like I have to explain. Because by this point, they just open up their notebook and they know what's going on. The mini quizzes, I do more in like the content within the content lesson. So I'll do it as like an entry ticket or as an exit ticket. And they have these concept test cards. Every kid has A, B, C, and D. And they have those in their pencil case. And like we'll just go through and I'll have a few questions. And it's a really good way for me to see, like 20 out of the 26 got this one correct. I should probably like pull those 6 at some point and, review that concept. But you could also do this on mini whiteboards. You could do it on paper. You could also, you can have short answer questions, but the goal is for students to get immediate feedback in the mini quizzes. So really they need to know in the moment, did I get this correct or is it incorrect? So I would maybe suggest not using this for like something where students have to write out like longer answers. And I will stop talking now, and Kata, you can take over.
I actually think you answered most of, if not all of the questions. But I think if you could just elaborate a little bit on how what's your threshold for like reteaching a topic or a concept that the mini quiz or shows that the students have forgotten a lot of information. How does that work?
Yeah, for the mini quiz, I would say like that's like definitely like skill or standard targeted. So like that is like if I notice when we're doing a mini quiz that, I have more than like a handful of kids who are missing it, like I will definitely like make time to go back and reteach like generally like in the moment. And then I'll just make sure to include a similar question the next like time I do a mini quiz. And over that standard. So I definitely like keep track and I try to address misconceptions in the moment for the mini quizzes. For the retrieval grids, I just saw a question that asked if you could go back, Virginia, to the ELA. I think it's 2 slides. Yeah, so I saw a question, do they do all of them or do they pick only some? My goal for students is to answer all of them by the end of the week. On Friday afternoon, we do a mix and mingle where they get like 10 minutes we'll switch multiple times, but they'll get to basically compare their answers to someone else. And that's a chance for them to ask questions of their peers. And then I check their notebooks and then I know, like, I can tell by looking at their notebooks, okay, like I need to address like the dialogue piece. Like I need to go over that again, or like, I need to revisit like, the language piece, like adverbs or something like that. Like, so that's just like, that's like anecdotal that I don't have to address in the moment, but I know I need to like go back to it, probably the following week, to make sure that like, the understanding is there. But these are also all things that we've like sort of beat into the ground. So most students will be able to answer all of these by the end of the week, accurately.
And there was one question about the instructional hierarchy, like where you would see this fitting. And I think, Lauren, you were sort of getting to that, I think, just now. But to be clear, these are topics that your students are very comfortable and familiar with by and large.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, definitely. And, sometimes I'll throw in like, I threw something in from science. Like sometimes it's also just about like how, like, are you paying attention? Right. Like, and it's a good reminder for them, like, like I maybe should have been listening a little bit closer when we talked about this yesterday, and it's never like a punishment, but I am very honest about like, this is why we're doing this. And, once you start having these conversations with students, they really do like, they start to use the language themselves. They're like, become pretty fluent in the language of like, this is like helping me learn, my brain is storing this, that sort of thing. So.
And then one more question, and then we're moving
Yeah.
on to Stephanie here. From Katie, this is a good. How do students, when they're checking answers with each other, know that their grid answers correspond correctly to each other's?
No, I got home probably.
So I have them check if their answers are similar, I have them check, and if their answers are different, I have them circle it, and then I put my grid under the dot cam for them to compare their answers to mine.
Excellent. Over to you, Stephanie. This is great, guys. Keep the questions coming.
So I'm going to talk about a variation of this that I use in first grade, basically where they give me a visual response. Now you can do this with absolutely no materials, but you can add some materials for novelty, which always adds a little more fun, especially for our little kids. So I'm going to be using a traffic light for these activities. So I could have the students get out their red, yellow, and green crayons or markers. You could use these little like math tiles or cubes, as long as they have a red, yellow, green. You could use pom-poms. I've even cut up just colored paper into squares and given them each one of each color. So I provide a question or a prompt that has 3 possible answers, and I try to always have those answers displayed on the board with the colors. I have a traffic light that's on my whiteboard mounted, so I could also just write the answers next to the lights if I wanted to. And then all the students reveal the answers at the same time, and that is very critical because you want them all to be doing the thinking. And so if they're able to display what color they think it is right off the bat, you're going to have the kids that are very confident, the ones that would always be raising their hands, they're going to get it up there fast. And then the ones that are lagging behind, that maybe it's going to take them a moment longer to retrieve that information, they're just going to copy. So it kind of takes the benefit out for them. So you want them to reveal at the same time. Another way you could do this is just with their fingers. Like you could establish red is always 1, yellow is always 2, green is always 3. And when I do that, I'll say fist when you know, and they know to put their elbow on their desk and their fist like this when they have their answer ready. And then I'll say ready, set, show. And they all show how many fingers at the same time. And they know at this point when they show, when they all reveal their answer, I'm scanning the class and they know it's going to take me a moment because I'm going to look at what everyone thought before I give the feedback. So I observe, I provide the immediate feedback, and in some cases, they'll build on their responses, and I will tell you more about that when we go to some of the variations. So this is a quick video. This has 2 different ways that I've used this. It's retrieval practice, so these are older concepts that we're just reviewing quickly.
The first word is going to be clean. Like we need to clean the floor. Think about which one of those sounds you hear. Ready, set, retreat. Tell me the sounds. Clean. You can leave the yellow cup on your desk, get your marker out, and say as you write clean. Okay, let's check it with the board. Tell me the sounds in clean. Full. Clean. Erase and reset. You're trying to remember the Gila woodpecker and what it ate. Okay, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to see if you can remember. And then I'll tell you. And then if you need to change what you think, you can. All right, ready, set, retrieve. Okay, this is very interesting. We have some of all 3 colors. Okay, now just sit it down on your desk. All right, now let me give you a clue, and if you need to change what you think, you can. The Gila woodpecker eats some insects, but it also eats some plants. If you need to adjust what you think, you can do it now. Okay, and when we check, the Gila woodpecker is an
Omnivore.
All right, recess.
Right? So you could use this across any subject area. And I love how they get that instant feedback, like immediately. So with the sounds and spellings, that's an example where they show what sound they heard, but then we build on that by having them actually spell the word. I could even add the challenge if I showed them the spellings for those sounds, but then maybe I just had the picture clue remaining there. I took the letters away. Then they're having to actually work even a little harder to retrieve that spelling. What you can't see in the video for that one is when I say let's check it on the board, I'm actually writing on my whiteboard easel and they're checking their spelling with mine. You could do that with different sentence types, author's purpose. With math, I think it would be fine if you had like a 7+8 and you had different strategies. Maybe they want to use a doubles fact, or maybe they're going to make a 10. And so you can do it where there's not just one correct answer, but they could make their choice and then justify, well, I know this double, so I would use that. Then you could build on that by having them actually solve it. You could do different types of story problems, telling time, animal types, habitats. You could do the optical properties like transparent, translucent, opaque. You could do it with map and globe. I mean, the possibilities are truly endless for that. And it's something really quick. Like I say, you could do it with just 1, 2, and 3, their fingers, but you saw we had solo cups for that one. So that just adds a little bit of novelty and makes them even more interested.
One quick question for you, Stephanie.
Sure.
Jen loves the sound example with the challenge of the spelling. What does feedback look like if they need to make an adjustment?
Okay, so in this routine, pretty much they were self-correcting because I wrote it on the board. They are very used to making these adjustments with their spelling because we do this daily with Edley, and a lot of they know if they missed a sound, they don't erase their whole word. They just erase the one sound and write the correct spelling for that sound. So I also, if I'm not writing it on the board, I can walk around. Sometimes I'm walking around while they're writing it and I'm just, maybe giving a little bit of feedback individually as I go. So they just correct. In that case, they were looking at the board and making their corrections themselves. Okay, so now we're going to move on. This is our third section, just some more traditional forms of rapid retrieval. These are things that probably all of us have used. I had used them in the past, but as I've become more interested in retrieval practice this year, I feel like I've honed these skills a little more, made them a little more purposeful and powerful. They're low friction, high impact moves. They can turn passive listening into active thinking without interrupting the flow. You can do them on the fly. In some of my research over the past week or so, when I was getting prepared for this, I saw an idea that I loved because I have a dog theme in my classroom. And they said you can put a golden retriever little bitty icon in the corner of one of your slides as a reminder to yourself, hey, pause here and get some retrieval, quickly. And so I thought that was fun. You can have a golden retrieval. And so we're talking about things here like choral response, think, pair, share, a quick jot, things that we've all done. So we're just going to talk about how you can make some slight adjustments and perhaps make these even more powerful. So I'm going to start off with the think, pair, share. And I like to think of this kind of like in a parking garage with that little gate that comes down. You got to have the think gate down. That's how you optimize this routine. That's how you really turn it into a retrieval routine. They have to have that time, that process to pull that information from their mind before they start talking. So we don't rush that step. If you don't have the think gate down, if it's bypassed, then you're going to have a lot of students who are in that passive mode. They're just waiting till they get to the talk part so that their partner can tell them the answer. So in my classroom, we have a partner A, B. I make sure that I vary who starts. So it's not always one student who's sharing first. If you don't have that think time in there, basically they're not having that cognitive struggle because learning is hard. And so, I think in the past, if somebody would say, oh, I can't remember, I would be real quick to jump in and rescue. But now I'm like, that's okay. Remembering can be hard. So give it a little time, think back to, and I'm trying to train them not to just give up and say, oh, I don't remember, that it's hard for adults too. But if they don't think, they don't get that retrieval practice, they don't build that memory. So it's really a waste of time. So the think step is crucial. And basically, I put this slide on here just to point out that I feel like at the beginning, the modeling and the practice and the training is what really makes the difference. And it takes a little time at the beginning of the year, but for the think step, you want to really model. What am I doing during that step? Because we can't see our brains thinking. So what should be going on in your brain during that step? So I'll do a lot of think alouds at that point. You can also have them jot something down on their whiteboard or something. It could be a picture, just something. I tell them if you draw a picture, that's great. Just make sure you're able to explain that and what that connected to for you. We train on how to actively listen to each other, how to speak in complete sentences. And I actually tweaked my routine mid-year after listening to Alana Gordon and Laura Stam's podcast, where at the end of a Think Pair Share, when they were about to share, Laura shared that she did an all hands up. And at first, I thought, well, that sounds good, but is that really going to make a difference? Oh my goodness, that makes a humongous difference. So now when they're done talking with their partner, I'll go all hands, and they all know, raise their hand straight up, elbow straight up. And what happens is they always knew I could call on them, even if their hand wasn't up. But you all know what that's like. If you call on that student that doesn't have their hand up, even though they know that you have the right to do that, they'll kind of look at you like, I didn't want to say anything. So they just know there's no opt out. So they have to be listening. They have to have their thoughts ready. And they never know if I'm going to say, what did you say to your partner, or what did your partner say to you? And if they can't answer sometime, that's okay. We'll go to someone else, but they know I'm going to come right back to them. So there's really no opt out. Like eventually you are going to be able to tell me the answer to that. A lot of times also, if it is a quick 1 or 2, 3-word answer after a partner sharing, we'll do that choral response. If it's something where they can all say it, I want them to all say it. So it just depends on the type of question I've asked. But again, the modeling, the practice, that is the key. So it all begins with the think. You can't ever skip that. That is the most important step. I have a quick video of this. These are just this kind of a montage of a few rapid retrieval different techniques.
Let's get ready with some rapid retrieval. Earth orbits the blank. Earth orbits the pictures made by groups of stars are called. Pictures made by groups of stars are called. Who said Earth revolves around the sun? Let's do a think, whisper, respond, because it may be hard to remember that name. So think about it first. I'll let you whisper it to your partner, and then we'll say it. Turn and whisper. Who said Earth revolves around the sun? Why does the moon's appearance change? Think. Turn. All hands. How does the moon's appearance change? Callahan? So now let's read our sentence and see if you can figure out what words are missing. Think about the vocabulary word that means the light bounces off. What word is that, everybody? Reflected sunlight.
So I will say one quick thing about that is that we had spliced the video. So there actually was more think time than what you see in that video.
And Stephanie, that was actually the question I had for you before we move on, was around think time. Like, can you talk about how you figure out how much think time to give, and and when do you vary it, and just like talk us through your own thinking about that, but thinking about think time.
Yes, thinking about think time. Well, it really depends on the complexity of the question. When it was like the question, and I don't know if you all could hear, I couldn't hear the student voices as much when I was listening just now. But the fact that they could say Copernicus for that, like, just blew my mind. But I knew that one would be a little bit harder, so they didn't need a lot of think time because it's one word. You know it or you don't. But I'll let them whisper it to their partner so they could all build a little bit of confidence before they did the choral response. When it's a more complex question, I'll give 30, 45 seconds, and they know, to really be sitting there. We've modeled it. And I think we've built this comfort level that, the first few times it feels painful when you wait a little bit longer than what they're used to, but they build that stamina up. And so, I mean, it just depends on the question, depends on like how far back they're retrieving. Like if it's something from quite a while ago, they might need a little bit longer to try to work their way back. So just depends on the question and the timing.
And then one last strategy that I just wanted to talk about really briefly, and there are certainly different iterations of this, but we call it big basket questions. So in fourth grade, I'm not sure, I added a couple of examples of questions student wrote today to, I think the 2 slides. Go one more. Yep. So each student has a pack of sticky notes in their pencil case, and I will pause, a couple times a day and have them write a question based on a lesson that we've done. And then they place them in our big basket of questions. And then just randomly, if we have a minute or two here and there, I'll pull a question and students can answer either orally, like with a partner on their whiteboards and a notebook. And it's a really good way to just retrieve information. And it also it's really made them more thoughtful. Like the questions now are so much stronger than they were even just like a couple of months ago. So, they hear their peers' questions, and then they want to make their question even stronger. So while Stephanie was talking, I just pulled 2 questions from today. And one question was, when does it make more sense to use the arrow way when subtracting mixed numbers than it would to use a number bond? And then another was, draw 2 rectangles that have the same perimeter but different areas. So you can tell there's obviously these the depth of knowledge required to answer these questions is not the same, but some students are asking more rigorous questions and than others, and that's okay. I just, the metacognition piece, I think, is the most important piece. They're really thinking about what they know and what kind of question can I ask based on what I just learned. And sometimes we didn't even talk about perimeter today, so I'm not sure where that came from, but it's an interesting question. So, it definitely gives you a sense of how students are thinking about the content. And then I don't know, Stephanie, if you want to chat about how you use it in your class.
Right. I usually write a couple of questions for each lesson. But I love the idea of the students writing them, and that's something we could strive for. This brings in the interleaved practice part because I don't empty the basket. Even if we only get to 1 question a day, those questions stay in there. So the kids love this. They love being the one to come pick the question out. And I said we can have an appetizer. So if we have one of those filler times where we need a couple of minutes, it's a great appetizer. But then sometimes on a Friday, we'll have the full-fledged picnic, and they'll take a piece of paper and fold it into 4s, and we'll do 4 questions, and they'll write it down. And after we've done those 4, I'll give that feedback, and they'll correct their own paper, with one of their markers or something. So it's just another great way for them to retrieve and get instant feedback on how well they're doing with that.
And I think we can share these slides. I think we can send these out with the recording. There's in the notes for the different slides, we have links and other notes. So please feel free to utilize that. I guess I just wanted to end. If you go to the very last slide, there are just a few resources, and obviously there's a ton of information out there. I feel like the conversation around retrieval practice has really grown in the United States over the last year and a half. So there's like so much content to be consumed when it comes to retrieval. But these three books, Smart Teaching, Stronger Learning, Powerful Teaching, and then Kate Jones has a series of books around retrieval. But these are just three that like I feel like I pull constantly and just taught me so much. And like retrieval practice in general, like it has changed the way that I teach and think about teaching and the way that I plan. And like it seems so simple now, but I just feel like if everyone were to start like implementing a version of this, like with, with what capacity you have, like, even just in one content area, I feel like, our students are better for it. So I really encourage you to like take something that you heard tonight or find something else that, you learn about in a book or a podcast or a website, like take it and try it because, students are only going to, grow and learn from, being asked to retrieve prior learning. So that's my soapbox and I swear to it.
Thanks, ladies.
And Lauren is the one that introduced me to this in September. And once you start learning more about it, it's so addictive. Like I absolutely love it and I can't learn enough. So it's definitely something to look into and add to your toolbox.
Yeah. Any last questions that we didn't get to? I think folks can hang out for just a few more minutes. I see one right now. Kimberly Thompson, have you seen a positive shift in overall student data since implementing retrieval practice? I'll let both of you guys answer that.
Yes, I definitely have. I think, like it can be like hard to like say like which shift like caused, the growth. But there has been a positive shift in my data. And I think like more than anything, like the way that students are having conversations, like you can just tell like they are walking away with more information than previously. So yes to the data, but also yes to like, just the way that they're speaking about the content and their knowledge that they've gained from ELA or social studies or whatever it is, right? Like you can also just hear it when you listen to their conversations.
Yeah, I would say anecdotally, like they are able to make connections between concepts. Even when we're doing a read aloud or something else, they'll bring back things that we learned about in September or October. And in math, I feel like it has been very beneficial because they retrieve these previous strategies. And math is so hierarchical. So
Mhm.
we retrieve those previous strategies. And what I found is even my students who would be considered the ones that need a little more help, a little more practice. They're getting these strategies that in the past, literally my struggling students would not have mastered, and they're getting there because they have the prerequisite skills so solid.
Excellent. Any other questions for Lauren and Stephanie? Oh, where did you buy the traffic light, Stephanie?
It's from Amazon. I'll try to find the link to syndicate it.
Yeah, what really struck me is just like the gorgeous symphony of oral language that is in the classroom, which is then, leading from the speech to print. It just it ties everything together along with the retrieval, but it just insanely impressive. And I will be jumping on these books.
I was going to say too, there is a primary version of that one, Retrieval Practice by Kate Jones, for primary. So I recommend it.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Excellent.
Hey, they should make a store out of that. Oh, wait.
Any last questions, or should we call it?
Ladies, right on time.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
Really appreciated. Thanks everyone for coming out. We'll be back in touch. I think we're gonna do getting the gist session in, I believe, in early May, and we'll be hearing from Sean Morrissey of from the word mapping project in early June. So we'll be in touch, but thanks again for coming out to Teachers Teach Teachers. You all are the best, and thanks for a great conversation.
Enjoy April Fool's tomorrow. We know what that looks like in schools. So rest up, friends. Get some sleep. We'll need it.